Hey, hey. Welcome to the March Live Hangout. I don't know why I'm playing it like this is Jason bringing you all the rock fit to listen to at midnight. My my third shift DJ voice. Hello and welcome to our March live hangout. We didn't do one in February mostly because we were trying to get this one ready, and also because February is notoriously a short month. So we are back. What's up, Logan? Uh, who else was here? Davy? You guys excited? I am. Just wait for Nick to pop in. And we'll get going. There he is. All right, Nick, I'm clicking. This is going to work. First try. I feel it. I feel it. Let's see if it adds him in here. Yay!
I guess you figured it out.
Do you want to know what I had to do? The magic workaround?
You just take me off as a raider on there? Yeah.
Yeah. What's going on?
Oh, not much. Oh, by the way, I think he's here. He pronounces it Davey.
Dave.
He's a friend of mine, but he gets
Awesome.
all the time everywhere he goes due to the weird way he spells it. So there you go, Davey. Oh no, things are going well. Me and my friends up here went around today on what's called an old lady date, where you go around to antique stores and thrift stores and look for stuff. So that's what I've been out doing today. It started snowing today because I live in a winter hellscape, and yeah, I'm done with the cold for this year.
Today, we've been in the 80s all week until today, but no, that's what we did last week. Was my in-laws were in town, so we went antiquing. Only we went here in town, which is not a lot.
Yeah, I can. Rutherford doesn't have the most vibrant community. Antiquing community. I think my parents are still have an antique booth over in Hinton. They've got a few antique booths around in the OKC area. There's some a little bit outside of it because that's mainly what they are doing these days. Yeah. But so if they ever get a chance, stop in. I don't remember which antique malls, but it's a few. That's their big thing, and they do a lot of estate sales now too. So
nice. Yeah, for real. Yeah. Yeah, we my big haul of the day was Ashton bought like a 49-cent tie, and I bought 47 Ronin on Blu-ray for $1.
Oh. 47 Ronin. Yeah. I got to see that in the theater. I guess, man, that would have been about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And an MMA fighter from Spokane, I got a picture with him. That's my big. I enjoyed the movie, but getting to meet this, he's like a very like doofy, hippie, kind of goofy MMA fighter named Cody McKenzie, and yeah, but it was cool getting to meet him. So that's my 37 Ronin or 47 Ronin memory.
Nice. Oh, so before we get too far into it, I guess we have to pour one out. R.I.P. Mondo as it was. I guess I didn't realize that Funko bought Mondo, like Mondo posters and all that stuff like a year ago. They fired a bunch of people and got rid of the posters, so no more Mondo posters.
Man, that's a bummer. Bob's ruining our life. Yeah, that's a shame. But more things getting snatched up and going away, unfortunately.
Yeah.
How have you been?
Doing good. Same old. Trying to get caught back up on some movies and battling Amber for the TV because she's playing that Hogwarts game.
Man, I remember when that was coming, people at work were like, oh man, I can't wait to play the new Hogwarts game like crazy.
Yeah.
I've never seen so many adults freaking out about Harry Potter since Brian Hampton's mom in 2003. So,
well, to be fair, I'm giving her this time before the new Star Wars game comes out because I'll probably be buried in that. But
speaking of games, a buddy of mine gave me some gift cards for Xbox, the Xbox Game Store on for my birthday, and I got this game called Door Kickers Action Squad, which is like a tongue-in-cheek action game. Think of like Counter-Strike Go or Rainbow Six, but it's a pixelated side scroller, and it's set in the 80s. So you have like, your standard machine gun guy, you have the breacher with a shotgun, this FBI agent, and one of the characters is this cantankerous old cop. He's called the off-duty cop, and he comes in wearing body armor and boxer shorts. It's great. If anybody gets a chance to buy it on sale, you're gonna die a lot, but man, I've had a good time playing it, and the music is like this rockin' 80s soundtrack. It's a great throwback to era and those kind of cop shows, and you rescue hostages in it, and you end up accidentally shooting a lot of hostages, and it's absurd. You get attacked by a lot of people with machetes, and it's awesome. Door Kickers Action Squad is great.
Have you dipped into GoldenEye on Xbox yet?
I have not. It's one of those series. I wonder if it's lost its magic through age, and I'm kind of just like, I'm okay with leaving that in the past.
I played through the Turok remaster they did for Xbox, which is so much nicer control wise. I played a little bit of GoldenEye. It's not bad. It is so much smoother now that you don't have the worst controller in the history of mankind, the Nintendo 64 controller. But it is a little weird to be like, I'm on this Xbox. Well, I'll turn this off and go play, Assassin's Creed on my PS5. But it's kind of fun to, like, I played about an hour and a half, and was like, okay, I'm good.
I'm getting set up so I can get involved in the chat.
Well, no spoilers in the chat. I am seeing John Wick 4 tomorrow, and that'll be Sunday's review. So we'll see how that goes. We spent this whole last week rewatching the other three.
He's going to shoot a bunch of people. A bunch of people are going to try to kill him and fail, and then he's going to shoot them or kill them in creative ways.
And I'm
Sorry
okay with that. But I'm okay with that. I had not seen 3 before, but man, whew. Like you go to that first one, you're like, okay. I mean, there's a lot of just like head stuff, and that's you go with it. But by that third one, when he's like puncturing eyeballs and stuff, I was like, oh my goodness, like it's like watching an Italian film.
John Wick by Lucio Fulci.
Oh yeah, like he stabs a guy in the eyeball, and like you see the eyeball like sink back into the socket before it pops, and you're like, hey man, I'm just here for like Keanu Reeves being a cool hit guy. What are you doing to me?
I remember when the first one came out. I remember thinking a Keanu Reeves action movie where he's like I remember everybody was pretty skeptical about that, and they never said just give it a shot. And it's become, as Logan said, our generation's guilty pleasure action movie, because it really is. It kind of really helped relaunch the film career of Keanu Reeves too, because he's been getting so much work since then.
It's our version of the Grampy movie of the Taken series. Like, Taken is for our dads. Like, this is our Taken.
Yeah. That's a pretty good analogy. So we have cold weather movies as our subject this month.
Yes, yes.
And what did you have in mind when you went for cold weather movies?
I thought about that after I suggested it, because initially my thought was, in fact, movies that have cold weather in them. And then I got to thinking about it, and I was like, well, you could think of like movies that are like, oh, it's cold outside, I'm gonna bundle up and watch this movie. And I don't know. To me, that was always more the idea of that's more like if we're ever to do like these are our comfort movies or our quote unquote rainy day movies,
Yes.
dad afternoons, if you will, as opposed to like just cold weather movies. I was like, well, we'll be doing it in what should be our winter. Again, it's 80. It's been 80 degrees all week here in Oklahoma, but cold weather movies. So I think make it more complicated to me than that. It's just movies that are about the cold.
Yes. And I was talking to you yesterday about, I tried to mainly pick movies where the cold weather had some importance to the plot, but usually when looking around, it has some significance. If a movie takes place in the winter, there's a reason.
Yeah.
I think the wintry, snowy season, there's two movies where I think it excels because I have a few of this genre on my list: Westerns and horror movies.
Okay.
Because of the sense of isolation and the extra threat that comes with the cold. And looking up, I looked up cold weather horror movies, kind of get an idea, and it's just so many things pop up because it's been used as a plot device so many times.
Yeah.
And in the Westerns, it's, the snowy plains and mountains of the American West and how much more difficult they make life and travel and how much, because in those days, I watched 1883, you get caught out in the middle of nowhere and it's cold, you are super dead.
Yeah.
So there's an element of danger. Plus, it just makes for a beautiful visual. So much great cinematography in Westerns, and the snow-capped mountains and trees really, really knocks it home. It's great. And I love the snowy visuals as a whole in the more cold weather movies, and what that can add to the story.
Yeah.
So,
I will say, to answer to Logan, we will eventually do our rainy day movies, our comfort movies. We will talk a lot more extensively about Event Horizon when that comes about.
yeah, that's one. I don't think there's been a category yet where that would fit in super neatly.
Yeah,
but I know you and I are both big fans of Event Horizon, so. Well, give me just 1 minute. I'll be right back, and we will get.
Oh, so what do you guys want to talk about? There's a bunch of. I did see. We're getting a plethora of shark movies this year. I don't know about you guys. I'm a sucker for underwater horror. I'm also a sucker for almost all shark movies. Like the Sharknado movies, not really my thing. But like if we're really treating shark, like even if it's a bad shark movie, I'm down. But we're getting 3 shark movies this year. Yeah, the Black Demon trailer. I saw that one. We're getting the sequel to the Meg, which I am more curious about. I like the Meg. The book is way different. It's much more of a horror novel than the movie was just Jason Statham punching a shark. But I am excited for that because Ben Wheatley, who's a really weird horror director, is directing it. But there's a new movie, and I immediately become a hypocrite about talking about shark movies that know they're bad on purpose. With this exception, there's a new Tommy Wiseau movie called Bad Shark?
Big Shark?
Big Shark.
Yes.
Sign me up.
Color me intrigued just because of what a bizarre alien human, whatever he is, Tommy Wiseau is. Just
There's one I got in a horror pack I need to watch because it has two things I love. It's a shark movie, and I'm pretty sure Dolph Lundgren is fighting sharks in it or fighting people who are feeding people to sharks. So it's Dolph Lundgren in a shark movie. I'm not honestly saying that out loud now. I don't know why I haven't watched it yet.
Dolph Lundgren's good movie to bad movie ratio is pretty skewed in one direction. I know there's been a few I started watching that I just couldn't quite get through. So
yeah,
but
they can't all be I Come in Peace.
can't be all what?
I Come in Peace or Dark Angel.
Yes.
Whichever.
Which is maybe his magnum opus. I know everyone remembers him as Ivan Drago, but I Come in Peace is wonderful. Well,
I'm gonna give you we'll go hot take here before we get started. I like his Punisher the best. I mean, I like the show, the Netflix show, but of movie Punishers, to me it goes Lundgren, Warzone, Thomas Jane Punisher.
I've never watched the Dolph Lundgren Punisher in its entirety, but I've actually heard pretty universally good things for the most part. Some people say it's not they're like, it's a good action movie, it's not a good Punisher movie. But
yeah.
I'm gonna get around to watching. There's some special edition of it out there on DVD I would like to track down too. I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah, it's he fights the Yakuza.
I remember seeing the beginning of it on cable years ago, and he has like Punisher throwing knives and a crossbow, and just it's like, man, this sounds cool. I always try to get my dad to rent it, but well, it's rated R, so that was a no-go. All righty. Well, cold weather movies. Do you want to start us off?
I can. So number 10. Our number 10 is a movie that probably none of you have ever heard of. I think I blind bought it. But it's based on a Greg Rucka comic from 2009. It's called Whiteout.
Yes.
It stars Kate Beckinsale and Tom Skerritt. And it's essentially, what if the thing didn't have an alien in it? Because it's Kate Beckinsale plays a U.S. Marshal. She goes down to this Antarctic base, and there's a serial killer, and she has to find out who the serial killer is before, like, the Antarctic winter comes and the sun goes away for 6 months. So we got a ticking clock. We've got, weather conditions. There's hypothermia where people being murdered with those cool, like, snow axe things that you see in the movies.
Oh yeah,
it's a huge paranoia whodunit. It's a lot of fun. Kate Beckinsale, this is like at the height of her underworld power. She's fine in it, but you have Tom Skerritt to play off of, so he's always great. But I enjoy it. It's a fun little whodunit movie that most nobody's ever heard of.
I remember when that came out, and I remember you said it's based off a comic, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What comic company made that?
I want to say it's Vertigo, like DC Vertigo, because Greg Rucka, he was a big writer for them. Like, he wrote Gotham Central and a couple of other, like, Vertigo character comics.
I remember when that came out, because I remember there was talk about it being based on a comic book. So I heard comic book and Kate Beckinsale. I think everybody heard those two things and thought it's going to be some sort of or horror or something like that, and it's not like that.
Yeah,
and I flopped real bad.
Yeah,
but the reviews ever since have been really good. I that's one that's popped up on a lot of lists of like very underrated movies of the 2000s, and it's.
I'm hoping with this new season of True Detective, which I'm excited about anyway, because it's True Detective, but it's Jodie Foster and another woman. But it's a snowy, so I don't know if it's Alaska or somewhere they are, very snowy, wintry, dark setting where they're hunting a serial killer. So I'm hoping it kind of maybe makes people look something. If it's successful, look up similar to it. Maybe people will find this movie. Because again, it's a fun little potboiler of whodunit, but it's just a movie that it came out and like a feather in the wind just vanished.
I think it was victim of the delivering something very different from what people are expecting.
Yeah.
Kind of like when people thought Snow Dogs was going to be about talking dogs, so they took their kid there. Instead, they got a weird dramedy with, what's his name?
Cuba Gooding Jr.?
Yeah, and people were like, where are the talking dogs? Probably a terrible analogy, but
Yeah.
and it probably still made more money than Whiteout, tragically. But it's one of those movies I can't recall ever reading a bad review for it. So, and the older I get, the more I love mysteries and whodunit. So sign me up. I am down. My number 10, I debated putting out the list because I'm not going to lie and say it's a great movie. It's a flawed movie, but man, it's ambitious and is it weird. This is another one probably most people haven't heard of. So it's 1977. We're fresh off the Western genre still going strong, and Jaws had, taken over. Jaws had been a huge hit. You know who else was a big star at that time? Charles Bronson. So somebody had the idea to take all of those elements and put them into one movie. The movie's called The White Buffalo.
Okay.
Bronson plays Wild Bill Hickok, who is haunted by his life of violence. Yes, Charles Bronson bears zero resemblance to Wild Bill Hickok, but you just kind of got to go with it. He was a big star at the time. He is haunted by the mythical white buffalo, which is this creature spoken about in legend by various Native American tribes, of it being this, it can enter your dreams and having supernatural qualities. So Buffalo Bill, or Wild Bill Hickok, not Buffalo Bill, Wild Bill Hickok teams up with Crazy Horse and a few other people to go and hunt down the mythical white buffalo. This supernatural albino buffalo. It is very surreal. It is very weird. You can tell they weren't quite dealing with the expertise or budget that they had in Jaws, because the white buffalo itself, it's memorable. It's this weird mechanical contraption. It just kind of adds to how weird this movie is. But I can't lie, I'm a sucker for weird westerns.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to restart my computer. And it doesn't get a whole lot weirder than this. I don't know if they ever come out and say flat out there's supernatural properties to this thing, but Buffalo, Wild Bill Hickok, and Crazy Horse gun up and go on a mission in the wintry mountains of the American West to go fight a white buffalo. It also has one of the coolest posters they've ever seen. It's old hand-drawn poster, and it's interesting. It doesn't quite work. I'm not going to lie, hence why it's number 10. But man, it's a movie that stuck with me. And so it's set during the winter, and it's just, there are a lot of beautiful shots and cinematography. But man, that buffalo is just, look up a video of it. The way it moves is just weird. The whole movie's even a little unsettling at parts just because of the tone and how just bizarre it is. But I still dig it. So White Buffalo, 1977. If you're in the mood for something kind of out there, it's worth a watch.
I can't wait to see this movie. This sounds amazing. That's right.
I don't know. It's something. I'm trying to think. It kind of reminds me in some ways. I don't know if you've ever seen Clint Eastwood's Pale Rider, or I can't remember. There's a few kind of surreal westerns from the 70s that it reminds me of in terms of how it's presented. But it's flawed. But man, they had an idea and they went for it, and they went all the way.
I just want to. I'm Charles Bronson. I die. I'm Wild Bill. I died at Deadwood.
Yes, it's Charles Bronson. He has one style of acting, and that's it. and he wears these weird outfits and sunglasses, and it's just something. They were doing a lot of drugs when they were making that movie.
Oh, I can't wait. All right, my number 9, like you said, a lot of stuff to come up was westerns and horror movies. But I was able to pull up 2 comedies for this list, and we're at our first one. I remember watching it as a kid with my parents and finding some of it funny. The older I get, the more hilarious this movie becomes. Because I want to be them desperately. It's 1993's Grumpy Old Men. Now, the weather doesn't exactly, I mean, it's not like a factor of the story, but like you said, it definitely takes place during winter time, as them living up in the Great White North. And the only time I've ever wanted to go shanty fishing is because of this movie, and just like drink skunk beer with Burgess Meredith.
I love Burgess Meredith and Grumpy Old Men movies. He's so cantankerous, and I loved his speech about smoking and drinking and eating bacon and how he lives for just like nobody plays a cantankerous old coot like Burgess Meredith, and no one ever will since.
No.
I haven't watched those since I was younger, but I like both Grumpy Old Men movies, and I think they're really solid.
Yeah, Mathal and Lemon. Of course, they had their huge career together with The Odd Couple and all that stuff. But I didn't grow up with any of that. It was just they were the grumpy old men, and I adore that movie. It's so like just one of those just like hit you in the feels type comedies.
Yes,
just like I mean for families, but just as the older I get, the better it gets.
I feel like that's one of those movies that will just continue to get older.
Yeah.
Or get better as we get older. Yeah. It's a comedy. I think it's been more forgotten as time goes on, and that's a shame because although I haven't seen it recently, I imagine it still holds up pretty well.
Yeah.
So now my number 9 is another Western. There were a few other Westerns to consider putting on this list, and let me see here. This is the only other Western. I had them back to back. This is a movie I really loved, but I am not in a hurry to see it again. It is Quentin Tarantino's other foray into the Westerns with an all-star cast. It's The Hateful Eight. The winter and the snowstorm and whatnot play a very important role in bringing things together for this movie for the events to unfold in this remote cabin. Storms raging outside, and these people, they have to, take shelter, or else, as we talked about earlier, in the Old West, you're going to die. You're going to freeze to death. So it brings all these nefarious characters together into a big old whodunit. Nothing groundbreaking, really, because, these various people, some with interconnected lives, coming together in a remote location or in a stationary location has been used many, many times. But it was done very well. It really captured how grimy and deadly the Old West can be. And it's a great mystery movie. It threw me for a loop many times throughout. I mean, Kurt Russell, Bruce Dern, Channing Tatum, and I think Michael Madsen is also in it, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, top to bottom, a pretty stellar cast. I have not watched the extended version that was on Netflix. Kind of goes back to I've not been in a hurry to watch it again because I don't think this movie will be as special the second time around. But I have a deep appreciation for how well done it was.
Yeah.
I know they were showing this in a wider format down in Portland, and I wish I could have gone down to see it on the big wider screen because I bet it was impressive. It's an impressive movie.
Yeah.
Visually, storytelling, acting, everything.
Yeah. I think it's the closest we'll ever get to like a Tarantino. It's a stage play. Like that movie is his stage play. All that stuff, and then Jennifer Jason Leigh, man, I have adored her since the first time I saw her in Fast Times, and she is a powerhouse in that movie.
Oh, she's great. That role, and it's just a lot of humor too. It's she's the dark horse of that movie and kind of steals the show in a lot of scenes.
Yeah. Okay, so number 8, I won't have a lot to talk about because for some reason or another, this movie makes it onto every list you and I discuss. It's 1999's Ravenous. Yeah, it's the Donner Party meets F Troop in all the best ways. You have great performances. When I think of this movie in the cold, I think of that weird cut to, is it Neil McDonough just like standing in the stream, just like shirtless and screaming. But no, this is honestly, I put this on the list, and then a movie that I thought about putting on the list, but didn't because it would seem kind of redundant. So you could count this as a twofer. It may be on your list as well, but it coincides with this. It's Cannibal the Musical. It's the story of the Donner Party in any way, shape, or get it. But we have to talk about Ravenous at least once a month.
I am mad I didn't think of Cannibal the Musical because that would have made it high on my list. Ravenous is one of the first movies I thought of, but I thought, no, I'm going to mix it up a little bit because I know Jason's going to mention. It's like I'm going to mix it up a little bit. But
that's why I
would Ravenous
put it so far back. I was like, I can't do top. I can't put it at the top. We gotta push it back.
Realistically, if I put it on the list, it would have made a top 5 because Ravenous. It's a great movie. It's about the Donner Party, about people freezing their asses off in a cave and eating each other. Oh God, I love Ravenous. But yes, it is not on this list. Put it on our number 4 spot because I was just like, I've been twice in the life. I'm gonna hold off. Number 8 is, I just realized I have 2 movies about the Winter Olympics back to back. Spoiler alert for number 7. It is one of my mom's favorite movies, and we rented it a lot growing up to the point we finally just bought it. It's an inspiring story about a group of Jamaicans and their dream of a bobsled team.
I love this.
From 1993. Yeah. This is such a charming movie. I'm not a big sports movies person. I don't give a damn about bobsledding. Nope. But this movie's great. It's hilarious. And you are rooting for these Jamaican dudes every step of the way. John Candy is great as the coach. He actually brings a ton of emotion to the role, and just how he advocates for them and how aggressively he works to how people take them seriously and let them compete. Fine role by John Candy, and the rest of the cast who Leon Robinson. That's the main Jamaican character whose name I couldn't remember. The whole team's great.
Yeah.
Of course, Dougie Doug plays
Doug.
Coffee, who's hilarious. The whole movie is fun with their training. Their kind of slapdash training leading up to them leaving for I think it's the Toronto Olympics. And it's inspiring. And I love that they didn't, for the ending, go for the yay, everybody wins and everything's great and we're amazing ending. And it's still a very inspiring ending that's loosely based on a true story. One of the best live action Disney movies, in my opinion, and a great comedy.
Yeah, I right now furious at myself that I'm not thinking about this movie because oh man, I grew up playing sports, and there are some sports movies that hold special places, but I think out of all of them, like that one's up there. Like it's just like you said, it's the purest definition of heartwarming that a movie can be. And
it's a good fish out of water story for the Jamaican team showing up in Canada, and they leave the airport and they're immediately go back in to bundle up. So many great moments, and an overall great movie.
Oh yeah. So my number 7, I realized I put two movies that are kind of tied together uh, next to each other. My number 7 is my other comedy. Now, being that we were not of the right age at the time, the heyday of the ski bum movie of the 80s was kind of lost on us. I mean, now in retrospect, I've seen Ski School, I've seen Hot Dog the movie, but of all of those ski shenanigans movies, only one of them do I still really kind of enjoy, and still has a banger from Eve 6, and that's 2001's Out Cold. uh, it's a early 2000s. It's their take on a ski bum movie. It's Jason London, Zach Galifianakis, and they're just like these weird like townies that run like ski instructors on this mountain. Thomas Lennon, like either right before or right at the beginning of Reno 911 is in it. Lee Majors is in it. David Koechner, and it's just snobs versus slobs. Just a fun ski movie. It's one I had it on DVD and watched it a million times, and it's one of those movies that still is just kind of a fun, dumb, early 2000s comedy when a lot of early 2000s comedies do not hold up.
Oh, and let me from like 98 to back 2005, those comedies have aged like cottage cheese on a hot July afternoon.
Yeah.
Ooh boy, and some have held up reasonably. Some, watching them again after we loved them so much when we were younger. Oh, there's some that I'm really afraid to revisit for that reason.
We did watch. We showed Ashton Super Troopers. For the most part, Super Troopers does hold up. However, I watched the trailer. They've reformed. Broken Lizard has.
Yes.
They have a new movie coming out, and watching the trailer retroactively made Super Troopers less funny. So don't watch that trailer.
Okay.
But yeah, like there's so many of those movies that are just like, ugh, man, this was it, huh? This was comedy. But I mean, and there are jokes like this movie. That movie does have some dated 2000s humor in it for sure. In 2001, nothing was funnier than getting your dick stuck in a hot tub bit. But for the most part, it is just a snobs versus slobs ski movie.
I was looking it up. I don't remember this movie at all. So it might be one I have to give a watch because, yeah, that one. And I remember the other ski movies you're thinking about. And while you were mentioning that, skiing movies, one movie that would have made my list had I thought of it about skiing was Better Off Dead. But it didn't strictly as much take place in the winter, but there's enough winter to probably include it on this list. But
yeah,
say la vie. Continuing my trend of the Winter Olympics was a movie from a few years back that knocked my socks off because good biopics or biopics, I've heard it said both ways, are hard to do and do justice to the person while being a good and entertaining movie. But I, Tanya, from 2017, managed to do it. I remember we were young at the time, 8 or 9, but I remember how big of news Tanya Harding's like bodyguard friend, whatever, smacking Nancy Kerrigan in the kneecap. I remember what huge news that was and how newsed up it was. On the front pages of papers, breaking news stories, everything. It was such a scandal.
Lyrics to Weird Al songs.
Yeah. And then time goes on and you find out more and more about what a weirdo Tanya Harding is and her whole story. And I was like, I can't wait to see this movie. And I think they did a great job. It's like a white trash winter masterpiece. Margot Robbie nails it. I think they did such a good job with the costumes. Sebastian Stan really creeps it up in this movie. He just plays such a sleazy guy, and so many of the people in it are just sleazy and trashy and terrible. And I can't lie, I love it. Alice Janney as her mom, wonderful. It manages to be both informative and extremely entertaining. Margot Robbie can act, and this movie really showed it. But it was good to see that such a big event from her childhood getting the big screen treatment like that.
Yeah, I remember. Oh man, it was everywhere. That's thinking about. We were talking about about that kind of in general at work. The stuff that was the news back, that was our pop culture. It was like you came home from school. I was in the third grade watching the O.J. Simpson trial with my parents every night because that was just like that was it.
That was on TV on every channel. It was in the newspaper every day. It was on the supermarket tabloid covers. That, back in the pre-internet days, those things, it dominated. You were everywhere. And a lot of us had like one TV in the house, so we all sat around watching the same damn thing.
Yep.
But
all right. Now I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball because my number 6 is Frozen. No, not that Frozen. The Adam Green Frozen.
Yep.
I think that maybe the biggest problem with this movie is I know why we called it Frozen, but I could tell you this movie was called Frozen 100 times. You're only going to think of the Disney movie. When really this movie is like the quintessential, like cold weather, the elements are terrible. Because you have these 3 friends. There's Iceman's one of them.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name.
And
it's the simplest of movies. There are 3 friends. We're stuck on a ski lift. There's a storm coming. The park shut down. We're high enough off the ground where we can't jump down. What do you do? And the amount of terror this movie ratchets up in a thing that I'm never going to do. I'm not a skier.
Neither am I.
Spoilers. I don't plan on ever riding in a ski lift. And so it's something that I'll have no sense of ever experiencing. And yet this movie like makes me utterly terrified of the thought of it. You have the part where one does try, we'll just jump out. The kid does and breaks both his legs. Now we've got wolves. You can't climb down. There's no rope. It's wire, so you can't. It's just gonna shred your hands off. You're freezing. There's no food. There's no water. It's an utterly terrifying movie that, again, unfortunately, due to its titling, which I don't know what you would call it, but due to its titling, nobody thinks of it because you hear Frozen, you think of letting it go. But find it and check it out. Frozen, not that one.
I remember when that came out. I've not watched it because that is one of the most terrifying premises for a movie I've ever heard. I hate being cold, and I don't like heights. You threw both of those things into a movie, and it's so plausible.
Yeah,
it is so plausible that something like that could happen because of some idiots operating the ski lift and isn't paying attention. It can so easily happen, and you are screwed.
Yeah.
I'll get around to watching one of these days, but that's genuinely why I haven't, is because it's like, that sounds incredibly stressful to watch.
Yeah, it is bleak, man. It is so bleak.
And and that's how that kind of premise should be played too. But whew, that's rough. But that's another one. While looking at winter horror movies, every single list that one pops up on, because very few horror movies use the winter elements to more effect than that one.
Yeah.
Speaking of horror movies that use the winter elements, my number 6 takes place in a very cold part of Europe. And I'm up real quick because I can't remember which country. One of those countries with a lot of blonde white people where it seems to always be overcast and cold. Oh, that's not the one I want. That's the problem now. Oh, it's Swedish.
It's Finn or Sweden, I believe is what it's called.
Something like that. They all kind of blend together in my head. It's a different type of vampire story, but one that was so well done. It's 2008's Let the Right One In. There's also the remake of the early 2010s Let Me In. And now apparently there's a TV series of Let the Right One In, which from what I've heard, I think they changed too much about it. I remember you and I years ago talked about Let Me In, the remake. And I've said it and I still hold this. It is one of the most pointless remakes ever. Let Me In's a good movie. And not to take anything away from the people in that movie, it's just, you can't improve on one of the finest vampire movies ever made. And that's what I think Let the Right One In is. It goes for it. And the perspective of this young boy, the stories about this young boy in Sweden living in this apartment complex. He's getting bullied, and he ends up befriending this strange girl who lives in the complex that smells odd and never seems to get cold, despite the fact she's running around in, a t-shirt and pants. And I think they're both supposed to be around 11 or 12 years old, or she's supposed to appear that the girl is in fact a vampire.
Yeah.
It tells an interesting story about vampires and vampirism and what it would take for somebody in that situation to survive. And also the fear and insecurity of being young and feeling like you don't have control of your life. The boy in the story, his parents are split, things are rough at school, and he sells that, and you really feel it. And the girl, whose name is Ellie, the vampire, she's found a very disturbing way to keep people around serving her needs. And she looks like a little girl, so she ropes in guys who have an appetite for children and basically makes them her servants. There's a number of disturbing elements to this movie, but it never comes across as skeezy or anything. And you get the impression that this guy that's kind of finding people for her is one in a long line. I know the book goes into the history of how Ellie became a vampire, which is, that's a very frightening part of the book. That whole thing, it's extremely unsettling. But overall, they make the vampire seem like a very sympathetic character, because this character was turned when she was quite young and has had to survive ever since with his hunger. And, the boy, this is the first time she's really getting that kind of friendship from somebody who treats her well and isn't immediately suspicious of her. There's one scene in particular in this movie that I think is one of the finest scenes ever put in a horror movie, and it is masterfully done, and it involves a swimming pool. If you all have not seen it, I just recommend watching it in entirety. That scene is beautifully done. Excellent movie. One of my favorite vampire movies, and one that makes you think.
Yeah, I love this movie, and I honestly had it on my list until I thought of Frozen. Yeah, it's one of those, like, with the remake, I do like, to me the best part of it is probably Richard Jenkins' performance as her helper. But yeah, it's one of those, it's definitely one of those, like, we Americans don't like to read while we're at the movies is the only reason this thing exists, because it's much like the soon coming, they've been talking about forever, the Americanization of Train to Busan. Like, why? Like, there's nothing you can add to this to make it any better.
You had never heard of Let the Right One In or never watched Let Me In is it's a great movie.
Yeah.
I don't think it has quite as much of a bite to it, so to speak, as Let the Right One In, but it's still quite a good movie. And you have Chloe Grace Moretz, and I can't remember the name of the kid, but the acting in it's great. And it's a solid movie. It's just, I watched them both. I watched Let the Right One In first, and it just, it doesn't manage to capture the same magic. I will say, though, I do tend to see.
There's something much more fairy tale like in Let the Right One In than that doesn't come across to me as much as in the American remake. Like there's just, I don't know what it is. Like maybe it is the language, or maybe just the way that, because like the American ones feel so dark, but because of it's cold, but the whole movie is filled with like orange lights.
Yes.
So you don't get like how cold it is that you do in the Swedish version.
And that's the thing. It's like things in the Swedish version, they're so cold, and so much of the stuff is like the buildings are very sterile looking, and it's got that European look and feel that they couldn't recreate. I will say, though, I tend to agree that Richard Jenkins is probably the big edge that Let Me In has over the Let the Right One In.
Yeah.
So I'll get around to watching this series at some point, but
I
read enough to
it got canceled. Showtime already canceled it, so there's only one season.
They changed a lot of the basic premise, so I was not quite as interested after hearing that.
Yeah. All right, my number 5 is honestly, without the name value of the top 4, as far as like just something newer, could probably be number 1. It's from 2018. It's a Netflix original, so in my bid to stick with Netflix, I'm currently looking for it by other means to own it physically. But it's a movie directed by the guy who directed Blue Ruin and The Green Room. So it's that type of movie. But it's Hold the Dark. It's based on a novel. You have Jeffrey Wright, Alexander Skarsgård, and oh my goodness, Lisa Marie Presley's daughter. Who's she was in Mad Max, Fury Road, and she's been in a bunch of stuff. I cannot remember her name for the life of me. And the kind of two stories going on is Jeffrey Wright's an older gentleman who's a wolf expert, and he is brought to like this like small village in Alaska because there's a wolf supposedly that attacked and killed this woman's child. Meanwhile, her husband is Alexander Skarsgård, and he's in Afghanistan. He's in the army. And then like it becomes a movie that's thriller by the guy who made Blue Ruin and Green Room. So you know what you're getting into if you've seen those movies.
Yes.
Jeffrey Wright is fantastic in it. Alexander Skarsgård is terrifying. And it has some pretty wild twists in it. I will say this, I won't spoil what the twist is, but there's the only thing is after reading the book, after seeing the movie, the book is great. The book has one more twist that's even wilder. I don't know why they left it out of the movie, but it's on Netflix now. Like I said, but and again, you're in the Alaskan North wilderness. It's mostly this Inuit town, where like people don't like outsiders. They don't like police. They certainly don't want to work with either. And it's just like a great pot boiler by a guy who can make movies that make you hold your breath for an hour and a half just with anxiety.
I didn't realize, I've heard of this one. I didn't realize it was made by that guy. Jeffrey Wright is a fine actor who I believe should get more credit than he's due, because that guy he's stellar in everything. This is one I ran across a lot while I was researching, because a lot of times I'll look up, movies just to jog my memory when we're talking about a certain subject. This one kept popping up, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this one for a variety of reasons. So I wish I could have seen it beforehand. Probably would have made the list from the sound of it because some right.
And it's a movie. Like I said, right now it's just buried on Netflix, and I think E-Crater and some people doing the Lord's work on Etsy have it. I'm gonna try to get it on Blu-ray, just to have it. But no, it's well worth a watch. It's a really good movie.
I'm looking forward to that. Speaking of mysteries, my next one, I wouldn't say as much of a mystery as you're trying to kind of guess what things are going to go wrong next. I slept on this movie for a long time. I didn't see it till last year, actually. I watched it one night, kind of out of the blue, because I kept on hearing great things about it. Directed by Sam Raimi, starring Bill Paxton and Billy Bob Thornton. 1998's A Simple Plan. It's a great movie for seeing what will happen if you try to hide something you really can't hide, all the things you try to do to hide it, and how badly things go. Because in this movie, the basic plot is Bill Paxton and his brother and his brother's friend are out in the woods, and they find a airplane that had crashed that is filled with millions of dollars of drug money. It's the dead of winter, so they want to keep the money, split it, and just wait till the plane's buried, so it won't be found till the spring, and they can get away with this money free and clear. The hoops they jump through to justify this and justify all of the actions they do afterwards, which are extensive, to cover it up. It's shows how badly greed and money can corrupt people. Excellent story. Bill Paxton and Billy Bob Thornton are awesome in it. It has been heaped by critical praise over time, and I can see why. But just seeing how thoroughly things disintegrate for this group of people is amazing. And there are some shocking moments in it too, and surprisingly bloody moments that take your breath away. I was pretty blown away by this movie, and I can't believe I slept on it for so long.
Yeah, that's easily a top 10 Paxton for me. And Billy Bob Thornton is great at that movie. I like that it was like this weird moment in Sam Raimi's career. Like he had finished Army of Darkness, so he'd done his Evil Dead horror movies. He'd done Darkman, and we haven't got to Spider-Man yet. And he was like, "Don't mind me. I'm just going to spend the mid-90s like just kind of making these awesome movies like this." And you have The Gift, like these weird, almost like his. Who we'll
The
talk
Quick
about.
and
Yeah, Quick and the Dead, like these weird, just little genre movies that aren't like, we're still Sam Raimi, very much Sam Raimi, but also like very, very not what you think of when you think of Sam Raimi's filmography.
Not what you would expect, but man, he is talented, and he did a lot with this cast, and a pretty formidable cast. And great, man, the dude has an eye for cinematography because the movie looks beautiful, in this frozen rural town, and how that plays into the story, because the winter setting plays into the story a lot.
All right, so my number 4 is one of the movies that was the first thing that popped into my head when we did cold movies or cold weather movies, because if you're thinking of horror movies that take place in the winter, there are 2 that come immediately to mind, and this is one of them. It's 1980's The Shining. I mean, what do you want to talk about The Shining? It's not only, I mean, it's a cold movie, made even colder by the way Kubrick directs. If you want to have a lot of fun, not with this movie, but with the idea of fan theories and just kind of how insane fan theories can be, Watch Room 237. Do not go into it thinking it's just a documentary about The Shining. It is not. The Shining is basically just used to show what insane fandom can be. So if you're into that, watch that. But I mean, it's The Shining. It's notoriously and hilariously, when anybody talks about movie critics, it's the one that always gets brought up because how famously critics hated this movie when it came out. It's one of the top 5 movies I always think of when I think of Roger Ebert giving bad reviews to what are now considered the greatest movies ever. This is one of them. He really had a thing for Kubrick and David Lynch. He hated them both because he reviewed this terribly. He reviewed Full Metal Jacket, Blue Velvet terribly. But yeah, so it's The Shining.
To this day, I have never watched The Shining.
Really?
Really. There's a few reasons for that. When I was younger, it was because of how much it was hyped up, and that kind of turned me off to certain movies. Part of it, this is sacrilegious, I'm not a huge Jack Nicholson fan.
Yeah.
I think he's, in my opinion, one of the most overrated actors ever. He can be good in certain things he can. But the dude plays one person repeatedly.
That's true.
Over and over and over. He does not have a lot of variety. I need to get around to watching it because I'm sure it's a good movie. But one other thing at this point is I've heard so much about it. I feel I've seen it. I pretty much know how the movie's going to unfold.
Yeah.
But I watched most of the Stephen King movies, and it's one I really need to give a shot. But yeah, there's just a few things that kind of turned me off to it, and I haven't watched, but I need to just bite the bullet and do it, because there's been a lot of movies that I avoided watching when I was younger, that I've watched now that I was older, that I appreciate them a lot more. This is probably one of them. I'll probably like it just fine.
Well, you got to watch it so that you can watch Dr. Sleep, because Dr. Sleep is great.
That's what Logan said.
Speaking of Stephen King, I love the man. He's my favorite author of all time. I'm now in my mid-30s scrambling to find other writers to like, because my entire reading history has been revolved around one guy. But watch this. Don't watch the TV miniseries that follows the book almost to the letter, because hoo-wee. Aside from Steven Weber is great. But that TV movie is rough.
I've heard of some people preferring it because a lot much more closely follows the book. But I mean, we remember those 90s Stephen King adaptations. A lot of them didn't have the talent or budget they needed to really pull them off.
No.
The Stand and then the Langoliers.
Yeah. Now, the problem with the Shining one is it's the best and worst example of adapting Stephen King. Because yes, you do get more of the descent into madness that Jack Torrance gives, and it's not just Jack Nicholson like gripping the wheel from the opening shot, ready to murder it. Like, he's ready to drive that bug right off the cliff from the opening scene. But then also you have to like try to make like animal topiary scary on a 90s CG budget, and now you can write that on paper. Topiary lions are stalking a guy out in the field of snow, but you put that on screen, it ain't working.
Like the Langoliers from the Langoliers, yeah. That CGI has dated exceedingly poorly. But I remember at the time, wow, look at that. Yeah, no. It looks like they're trying to watch something on a Sega CD. It just doesn't work. Speaking of winter set horror movies, one of them that immediately popped into mind for this was a flick I think used this setting so well. I watched a bootleg DVD of it in Iraq when it came out, and after I got back, I watched it again. So I wasn't watching one that was, filmed on a camcorder in a movie theater. 30 Days of Nights was 2007, 2006, 2007. Based, of course, off the graphic novel. The premise is the northernmost town in Alaska, where they have a month of dark every year, is besieged by vampires. Antics ensue, and the people of the town have to survive this onslaught of vampires. The vampires kill their power station and cut them off, and these people are trying to hide out from this ravenous gang of vampires. One thing I think this movie does exceedingly well, it is the one I bring up when I try to point out that vampires are not humans. They are this apex predator. They may vaguely look humans, but they are not. And this movie really hammers that home. They have a human appearance loosely, but their mouth full of jagged teeth, their eyes, the fact that they speak in a different language, you are reminded throughout that they aren't humans. They're predators and we are prey. The vampires are they are not remotely sexy. They are dirty. They are nasty. And it's just how relentless and cruel they are with coming after people, like making that girl walk down the middle of the street calling out for people. And Danny Houston, shockingly, is the lead vampire, who, that's some interesting casting, but there's one part where they're cornering a woman and she's like, "Oh God." And he says, "God?" It's like, he's listening, he's like, "No, God." And they all kill her. They're so sadistic and evil. I think this is how vampires in movies should be done. And of course, that the premise is obvious. Oh, what if they were someplace where they didn't have to worry about dying by UV exposure and sunlight? And it answers that well. The casting of Josh Hartnett as the main character is not the greatest, but Danny Houston as a vampire and Ben Foster as kind of the vampire familiar, really great, man. Ben Foster, that dude can act. I hope at some point he gets the role that will finally land him an Academy Award, because I think he's that talented. I just think he needs the right project. One of my favorite vampire movies, and it's brutal and it doesn't pull any punches. And I can appreciate that from a big budget vampire movie. And seeing how it just shit. This movie gets really dark at times, and seeing what these people are having to do to survive, because you're not only having to contend with vampires and no electricity, it's the dead of winter in Alaska and you will freeze to death. So if you haven't for some reason seen 30 Days of Night, people, it's a great vampire movie.
Oh no, it's so good. And I love the fact, number one, also that movie you get a surprise Mark Boone Jr. appearance as the snowplow guy.
Yes.
But the fact that like it took up until like the early 2000s and a comic book guy to be like, "Oh really? Nobody's 200 years of vampire books and lore, and nobody thought about just putting them someplace where the sun doesn't come up?"
Yeah. It writes itself.
Yeah.
And it just sets.
I do like Hartnett in that movie, though. I do. I'm not a huge Hartnett guy. Like that movie, Penny Dreadful, and a weird like erotic thriller called Wicker Park, or kind of that's my
Go to Wicker Park.
My three Hartnett of The Faculty. So I have 4 Hartnett movies.
He was trying to transition out of the heartthrob at this point, and I just don't think he was the right pick for this role. I think you needed somebody a little older and a little more grizzled. He's not bad. It's just he's one of the weak points of what I think is a pretty stellar movie. And I really like the rest of the cast. Melissa George, I think she does a great job. And I like Mark Boone Jr. a lot as the snow truck driver who goes out like a boss, let me tell you, in that movie. But it does a lot with the premise, and it doesn't pull any punches. And I can appreciate it. And it uses the setting of being snowed in to such great effect.
You mentioned the how scary they make the vampires. The scariest scene in that movie, the hardest scene in that movie is it's the old man who's like in stages of dementia when they're up in the attic, and he wants to leave.
Yes.
And they're trying to hide. We gotta be quiet. We gotta stay hidden. And he wants to leave. He wants to leave, or he's wanted to look for his wife who has passed at this point, but just that you have to keep your dad quiet. Just rips your heart out while these vampires are ripping hearts out.
There's the fate of a guy's wife and children in that movie breaks my heart every time. Mm-hmm. It's a shockingly heart-wrenching movie in spots, because you feel for the characters and the unthinkable ordeal they are stuck in.
Do not watch the sequel movie Dark Days, because that movie is unwatchable.
It is. I try. No, I just pretend it doesn't exist. No, yeah. I was excited when I saw it. Just like, why have I heard about this? And all of a sudden it's on DVD. There's a reason.
Well, even that, I remember when that comic came out, I was like, probably should have just left it at the one.
They couldn't resist.
All right, number 3 for me, and it is a little sacrilegious to have this at number 3, but I'll explain why when we talk about the other two. Again, it's what do you want to say that hasn't been said? To me, this is a perfect movie. It's honestly top 3 for me greatest movies of all time. It's John Carpenter's The Thing. You have Kurt Russell at his Kurt Russell-ishness. You got Wilford Brimley, just that whole cast. Wilford Brimley, Dean Norris, not Dean Norris. Norris is the name of the character.
Yes.
That whole cast, man, it's just you have all that. The only thing missing from that movie is the fact that Carpenter didn't do the score himself. But I love the score to that movie, so it washes out in the end. But when you think cold weather, when you think surviving trying to survive how harsh the elements can be, on top of not being able to trust the guy sitting next to you, it's The Thing, man. It's a perfect movie that I've got. That you go on YouTube, type in The Thing explained, and you can watch 100 hours of video essays about how great The Thing is. You don't need me to tell you.
I will hold my thoughts on that movie because it will probably show up in my list later.
Yep.
I agree on all accounts, but I said I'll expand on that soon. My number 3 is my favorite Christmas movie ever. And you could fill up a list with Christmas movies. It's easy. But I decided to just put one on my list, and the crown jewel of Christmas movies, one I try to watch every year. It's National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, with of course Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo, and a young
Johnny Galecki,
Juliette Lewis.
Yeah.
Diane Ladd's ended up here looking at Doris Roberts, and of course Randy Quaid, and Elaine from Seinfeld, whose name escapes me at the moment.
That's Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
Julie, yes. Okay, that's why I had it confused. I love the cast. There isn't a part of this movie I don't love. And I love how crazy Clark Griswold goes by the end of this movie and the lengths he goes to. I think this is the best of the Cousin Eddie showings in the movies. And it just showing up, and he's out there in his boxers with a hat on, smoking a cigar, pouring his stuff from his septic tank on his RV into the sewer. The parents who arrive, and they're just old and cantankerous and awful, and the cat and the squirrel and the tree and everything. It shows how crazy the holiday season can get. It's my favorite of the vacation movies. It's a Christmas classic, and one that is hands down my favorite Christmas movie ever.
Yes, 100%. It's mine. Yeah, it's the only thing that missing that truly show what that Christmas Day with the family is great. Everything that leads up to it is an utter hellscape. Is that one of them doesn't work in retail?
Yeah, so do show the retail spots like Reese in there. He's like talking to that woman at the counter and like, oh, you can't see the lights, can you? Rusty's like, oh no, it's just. I agree. Probably could have gone into the retail aspect more. It would have been cool to see, but I love Christmas Vacation, top to bottom. It's a great movie.
So I didn't think. I honestly just didn't think maybe because I'm already thinking of, like, I'm already 4 holidays ahead because of retail. I didn't think of any Christmas movies. One that could have made this list, and mostly just so I could mention it because I want to tell people about this movie anytime I can. Deadly Games, aka Dial Code Santa Claus. It's on Shudder. Go watch it. I'll say it every time I can. Shudder is the best $6 you could ever spend in a month. This is one of the best Christmas movies ever. It is the closest any movie has ever come to unseating Christmas Vacation as my favorite Christmas movie because it is insane. But no, Christmas Vacation movie is the Christmas movie.
Yes.
All right, my number 2. So I thought about mentioning it, but I didn't want to show my hand too much. Talking about A Simple Plan. Is what's interesting about that movie is it's kind of Raimi's version of a Coen Brothers movie. To me, it feels that way.
Yes, you are not wrong.
And I love the Coen Brothers movies. No Country for Old Men as probably one of my favorite movies. And I think it's their best movie. However, their greatest original movie is a little nugget from 1996 called Fargo. You know the movie because we all talk like that whenever we think about Fargo. We all do the Frances McDormand, oh yeah, voice. This movie is hilarious. It's so quirky. What are you doing, Kat? It's the best of the Coen Brothers. And you have just this cast of, rock stars. You get Frances McDormand. You have William H. Macy. Peter Stormare playing the best Peter Stormare that ever Peter Stormared. Buscemi's great in this movie. The actor, oh my goodness, I'm losing his name now. He was in Zodiac, and he was Drew Carey's brother on the Drew Carey Show. He plays her husband, and like
John Carroll Lynch.
Like in that movie, I kind of want to be married to John Carroll Lynch, just because I know he'll wake up and make me breakfast before he paints his ducks.
Such a great.
It's such a great movie. It's so funny, and yet it's so dark. I haven't seen the show. I've always heard nothing but great things for the show. It's on my list to watch. I just have never got around to it. But the movie Fargo, I can watch over and over again. I adore that movie.
My number 2, I think it's one of the best movies of the 90s and one of the best movies of the 20th century. And it's also Fargo, because that's also my...
Woo! I knew we'd get one.
It's great. I think it's the best Coen Brothers movie, and there's a lot of competition for that, but it's damn near a perfect movie. It's one I would give 5 out of 5 stars. The way it weaves the tales together masterfully, the cinematography, the acting from an all-star cast, the story, the ending, everything. It just nails everything perfectly. It is the perfect culmination of all the talents and quirkiness of the Coen Brothers into one movie. This is a movie that I was watching old episodes of Siskel and Ebert. They spoke up incredibly highly, so they got this one right.
Yeah.
It's so damn good beginning to end. It's so rewatchable. The storytelling is so amazing. It just, if it wasn't for one movie, it would have been number 1 on my list. But it really, and this thing, I'm not hyperbole, one of the great movies of the 20th century, one of the great movies of cinema, period. If you haven't seen Fargo, see Fargo. It is so good. It's so funny, but it doesn't pull punches. It gets dark, and it gets bloody, and it gets really messed up.
It's everything you want from the Coens. Like, it's everything they do absolutely pitch perfect.
And it's amazing that they done so much good work after that. Because I mean that it did well in the theaters. It did well critically, and they kept on going and kept on pumping out great stuff. But Fargo is just the best.
All right. So my number one, again, I this is number one purely out of not so much nostalgia, but when I say cold weather movies, we talked earlier at the beginning about what we meant by that, and there was the idea of, well, cold weather movies could mean cold weather movies, like we've discussed, could also be just kind of, it's cold outside, I'll get my stuff DoorDash. I'm just gonna sit here under a blanket and just watch something for the day. And this movie covers both of that for me. It may be a little bit of a cheating because it is a TV miniseries. It is the greatest of these miniseries, bar none, with the great cast we'll get into. But it's 1999's Storm of the Century. Now, I remember watching this as it happened, live, and like taping it. And that was one of those ones, the stand was great, but the stand was so long. It was four VHSs, man. Storm of the Century you could get on two. But just the way that, it's everything you kind of want from Stephen King, and the fact that this isn't a Stephen King book, it's just his screenplay, is wild to me. During COVID, we had our weird like COVID ticks. Mine was deciding to thrift store and thrift books and all that stuff, all of Stephen King's books in hardcover. And I have this in hardcover. It's impossible to read because it's just the screenplay. It's written in screenplay format, so you can't just read it like a novel. I wish it was, but you have all the things that make a great Stephen King story. You have your little isolated Maine village. You have your white hat protagonist. You have this unspeakable evil of a character. You have a town of secrets. You have all these great supporting characters. You have peril not only from the outsider that's here now in the middle of your village. You also are dealing with the elements. Oh my goodness, cat. You have a great performance by Tim Daly as this small town constable / grocery store owner who watches evil just completely destroy his idyllic home. You have a powerhouse performance by Colm Feore as one of the scariest villains Stephen King's ever created, and the fact that he hasn't incorporated that character more into the books, even through the Tower stuff, which you could bring him in with Andre Lenoge, is terrifying. It has so many great snow moments. It has so many great scary moments. It has my favorite retelling of any Bible story I've ever heard, where he gives them the story of Job. Tim Daly does, and he tells the story of Job, everything that happens to Job, and he ends the story with Job turning after it's over, and he asks God why, and God's response is, "I don't know, Job. There's just something about you that pisses me off." It's hard to find now. I think it's streaming on YouTube with Salem's Lot and The Stand finally getting Blu-rays. This 100% needs one because I will buy it day one. It's of all the Stephen King TV stuff, it's the absolute best. There are some things that happened this I'm kind of shocked they got away with on TV, even for 1999. It's one that I remember when I was driving for FedEx. I was training with a woman, and I got her to listen to The Stand when we were driving. She was talking about Storm of the Century, and so we couldn't listen to it. They don't have it on an audiobook. So she pulled it up on YouTube and just played it on her phone, and we would just listen to the movie. And even listening to it, There's so many great performances in it. So if you get the chance, like I said, I think it's streaming on YouTube. They have it on Hulu. Watch Storm of the Century because it is the perfect, oh no, cold weather bad. Just a great horror story involving cold weather.
So my parents were big Stephen King fans back in the day. And given the fact we wouldn't watch R-rated movies, I always looked forward to the made-for-TV Stephen King stuff because it was something we could watch. And we watched, the Tommy Knockers, the Langoliers, and The Stand. We loved The Stand. You remember we had it recorded off TV and VHS, and that's how you and I first watched it. For me, the Stand is one of the shining examples of what you can do with a made-for-TV movie or miniseries. It's still my favorite, and we'll have to compare notes on The Stand and the newer version at some point. I remember we rented Storm of the Century after it came out. My mom hated it.
Really?
Yes.
Pam!
And it got too bleak for her.
Okay.
And
I can see that.
It's so brutally, unflinchingly bleak and towards the end, and it's not to give anything away, but I get it. For me, that is taking away the fact that it's really well done. It has a very frightening villain, and it's just he's so insidiously evil, and such a corrupting influence, and the fear he evokes, and what he's able to motivate people to do is, especially towards the end, it's so unsettling. And just the constable and him feeling like he's trying to go at this alone to stop this while everyone's wanting to, deal with this entity and whatnot. He's like, no, it's like, we can't do that. It does a lot with the setting, sleepy New England town on an island in the middle of the worst storm of the century. I know a lot of time there's only so much they could show on TV, especially in that era, but they did a lot with what they were allowed to do. They really did. I'm not watching in a long time, but it's a great Stephen King story. If you can handle, things getting bleak at times.
Yeah,
but,
it's when you think it's up. It's like Pet Cemetery, the Mist levels of bummer.
Talked about Midnight Mass, and that was like, that's what I saw. It's like evil entity comes to this New England island. It's like Storm of the Century did it first and did it better. But my number one is not going to be in the least bit surprising because you've already talked about it. It was going to be my number one because it's one of my favorite movies of all time. It works as a horror movie. It works as a mystery. It works as a science fiction movie. That is why it is both my favorite horror movie and my favorite science fiction movie. It's 1982's The Thing. This is one that there was never any doubt of where it was going to be on my list. One of my favorite movies of all time, starring one of my favorite actors, Kurt Russell, by my favorite director, John Carpenter. It nails so many things so well. It's a remake of a 1951 movie that is actually really good, and I consider putting it on this list because I think it's one of the best horror movies of that era. But John Carpenter took it and did something different with him because it's based off a short story called, I believe, Who Goes There?
It was like in Playboy or something. Like it was just like in a nudie magazine.
Yeah, it was about this horrifying, Lovecraftian, shape-shifting monster. Well, they couldn't pull that off in 1951 with the technology at the time, so they went with the direction of this kind of humanoid monster. And I think they did pretty good for being in the early 50s. In the 80s, when we had better special effects, they made this thing as practical effects masterpiece. The ever-evolving, ever-shifting nature of the thing, I still think it looks great to this day, and how many different forms it can take. The scene where he's going to use the those electric things,
Defibrillator.
defibrillator, and it just pushes his hand straight through and Jaws grab it. It still makes me jump. The blood test scene is one of the best scenes in horror and a great scene overall. And the way it goes is just wonderful. And you're always wondering who's who they really say they are. And I remember watching this on TV when I was much younger, and it's just the movie opens up and these people in a helicopter shooting at this dog. And you're just like, man, what's going on? Then you have the dog scene where the dog gets in the kennel and all that, how it unfolds. It's one awesome practical effects set piece after another in an excellent story and a terrifying isolated setting. And it sets the stakes very high because, Wilford Brimley puts in the simulation of what would happen if this thing reaches population. And it's like several thousand days or whatever until the whole world's infected. So there's those kind of stakes. These guys like, do we save ourselves? Do we contain this? What? Although somebody brought up a good point, the Norwegian team at the beginning, those people who speak their language at the movie ruined for the vinegar. Like, oh, I know what they said, which kind of sucks. And speaking of that, I will defend the prequel. I think it got bashed. People like, oh, the remake's terrible. There's not a remake. It is a prequel. Mm-hmm. I think it lost a little something by using CGI instead. I do, but I think I'd always been curious about how that had happened and how that story had unfolded, and I thought I did a great job showing it. And I like the variation of the blood test of, oh, this thing sheds fillings when it's assuming a form. It can't replicate those. And it doesn't capture all the magic, but it does a pretty good job. And I very much appreciated the prequel. It gets way more hate than it should. But The Thing from 1982 is an absolute masterpiece. It's my favorite among John Carpenter's movies, which is saying something because he has several movies that are on my top 10 of all time list. It uses the weather and the winter setting better than any other movie I could think of. It's just excellent. So easy pick for number one.
Yeah, I know a lot of people say Halloween. I think it's his magnum opus. My first question was going to be, what do you think of the 2011 one? Because I'm on the same as you. Like, I like that movie. The only thing that really ruined it was them deciding to put CG over the practical effects because it looks terrible. If you can get past that, it's a great prequel movie to set up Carpenter's movie, and it's very faithful to what you see and when you do get those glimpses of what happened in Carpenter's movie, they created it very well.
And it's good continuity because you see those brief glimpses when they go to check out that camp and this thing getting loose and kind of putting the pieces together of what happened, and they did well with it. They did. Even with the CG not being great, there were a few scenes where I jumped because it just kind of came out of nowhere. It's one thing about the creature is it's camouflaged right up to the moment where it's found out, then it just anything goes, and it takes on some sort of terrifying form. I love the part in the helicopter in the 2011 movie where the dude just like splits in half and bites into a dude. It just, it was never going to be as good. There's just no way, but it's a good prequel.
Yeah.
And pretty good follow-up. But 1982 is just the best.
Oh, yeah. What are you gonna do? So yeah, that is our cold weather movies. I do want to address, and it'll be food for thought for later, Logan, because I wanted to say something, but I didn't want to interrupt the flow of those things. Yes, season 1 of True Detective, behind Hero season 1 as one of the greatest single seasons of television ever. However, I will say Matthew McConaughey in True Detective season 1, probably one of the greatest performances in the last 50 years, if not all time. Matthew McConaughey's performance in that season is like it should be taught in a class. So if you haven't seen it, Nick, for sure season 1. Season 2 goes a little off the rails. Season 3 was better, and season 4 I'm looking forward to. But season 1 of True Detective, It's 8 hours of masterful detective storytelling.
Funny you mentioned Heroes season 1. I've still never seen a show with as dramatic of a drop in quality from season 1 to season 2 as Heroes. I mean, it like not just like gradual; it goes straight off a cliff.
Yeah.
Wow. That season 1 is building that universe. Man, it's great. It completely disintegrates in season 2.
Yeah. You flew too close to the sun.
Some people tell me season 3 was worth watching. I'm not going to get through season 2. I'm just going to pretend Heroes season 1 was it.
I watched all the way up until 4. When we hit like the secret alternate dimension carnival, I was like, I can't no more. I can't. But no, if you haven't seen True Detective 1 for sure. True Detective 2 has a really good Colin Farrell performance. And a really underrated Taylor Kitsch performance, but it's not great. Season 3, Marshall Ali, they kind of get back to the roots. It kind of draws inspiration from the West Memphis 3. That's a pretty solid one. And like I said, this 4th one, yeah, it's Jodie Foster, and I can't remember who the other lady is, but they're like detectives in Alaska. There's a serial killer.
I'm intrigued by the premise and Jodie, because we don't get to see Jodie Foster as much anymore.
Mm-mm.
By the way, this is Falcor, my new dog.
I've been seeing lots of Falcor.
Yeah,
He's a cutie.
Posting pictures of him like crazy. he's been another my second dog in a row whose name is a movie reference, because of course. So.
Well, yeah.
The never-ending story. Well, I saw him as like kind of look fuzzy like him. So, yeah, you're Falcor. I'm not talking about Logan's list. He mentioned there. I've not seen all of those. Like, I haven't seen Krampus. I haven't seen the Gray, Werewolves Within. I haven't seen The Revenant. I've heard Wind River is great.
I like Wind River a lot. Wind River is good. There's a sequel that I'm intrigued by. Werewolves Within was fun. It's what you kind of think of like a. I've not ever played the game. I think it's a like tabletop game. I think maybe
that's a different one.
Okay, the movie was fun though. Like it was. I love Krampus because Krampus is kind of Christmas Vacation with a monster. And Violent Night, of course, is great as well. As far as like snowy Christmas movies now, because it's Die Hard Santa, man. It's awesome.
With David Harbour, yeah, I'm sold. So yeah, winter horror, and that's the thing. Later on, next winter, we could do this list again, and I will have no problem coming up with two more. So, but as I predicted, we had some crossover. We'd have had more if I would have bit the bullet and put Ravenous on there. But I was like, I can't mention Ravenous again.
Well, I was like, we can't. Well, at this point, you can't not mention Ravenous. Eventually, we're just gonna have to like do like some watch party or something. Find a way to do it where we can all just like stream Ravenous.
I want that soundtrack, man. Just play that while I'm jogging through the woods.
There you go.
Oh God. Well, we'll have to convene and figure out what we want to do for next month. But I enjoyed putting together this list.
Yeah.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Logan, for being our #1 super fan. You and Amber both, I'd say, are.
Yeah.
And anyone else who joined us. Yeah, we'll announce what the topic will be for next month. But I do need to get going, unfortunately. But as always, I had fun talking to you, bud.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I will see you all next time.
All right. Bye.